Hi everyone, Stepan here. It's Friday, so we are going to have a look at a Vladimir Kramnik game. The game I'm about to show you is not normal. That shouldn't be happening in the world. A child at the age of 9 should not be playing chess this well. We are continuing the Belorechensk tournament played in 1984. In the first video in the series we covered his game with black against Arsen Oganyan. In this game he was white against Serdyukov. I have no idea who that is. This is Serdyukov's only game in the database, and it didn't really go well. So these are the only two games recorded at the Belorechensk tournament, his first. So Kramnik at the age of 9. Now watch what happens. He plays e4. We have c5, knight f3, d6, the open Sicilian after d4, and after cd, knight d, knight f6, main moves, knight c3. In this position, Serdyukov plays the Sicilian Dragon. And the first astonishing thing is that a 9-year-old boy plays 15 straight moves of mainline theory in one of the sharpest openings. That's the first thing. Now, that may be common now, but I don't think it was that common in 1984. Okay, so we have bishop to e3, and Kramnik goes for the Yugoslav attack setup. So after bishop g7, we have pawn to f3. The Yugoslav attack, the most aggressive way to play against the dragon. Now, if you don't know the Sicilian Dragon theory, I have made a video on that. You can find the video on the channel. Okay, so black castles. And white plays bishop to c4. The idea behind this setup is that white is trying to firstly consolidate his center by defending the e4 pawn, meaning that knight e4 is never an option, knight g4 is never an option. More importantly, he's developing all his kingside pieces first, pointing them towards the black king, even though he's going to castle queenside. So the idea is basically queen d2 castles queenside, and then the real purpose of the move f3 is shown. It supports h4 and g4. So the Sicilian Dragon is one of the sharpest openings because each move matters, and white has to attack on the king side as quickly as possible. Black has to do the same thing on the queen side, and especially along the c file. So one of the sharpest variations in all of chess. Also one of the most theoretical variations in all of chess. So you could go wrong in one move, and also if you don't know a bunch of theory, then you'll probably just lose. Okay, so knight c6. Luckily for Serdyukov, he knew a lot of theory, so it was actually a good game. Queen to d2, bishop to d7, main move, castles queenside, main move, now rook to c8, bishop to b3 played. You get your bishop out of the way because knight d4 could have been a threat. Then if you take with the queen defending the bishop, then there are discoveries by this knight, etc, etc. So you just get the bishop out of the way. This is very common in Sicilians. And black plays the move knight e5, opening his rook up to the c-file. If you are aware of Sicilian sacrifices, then rook takes c3 is one of the main sacrifices for black. Not that it's good here, but pressure along the c-file sometimes makes that possible. Also, black usually wants to occupy the c4 square with his knight, and one of the main knight maneuvers in many Sicilians, and in the Sicilian Dragon as well, is knight b8, c6, knight c6, c5, knight e5, c4, and the idea is you're going to get the bishop pair, because either you fork the queen and bishop and white gives up the dark squared bishop, which he doesn't normally do because you need pressure on h6 and along this diagonal, or he simply takes on c4, which is more common. Okay, now here there are two moves. You can either play king b1 or h4. Kramnik went for h4, which is of course more aggressive. Black plays the move h5, which has to be played. You want to prevent h5. If you don't, then you're in trouble. And for this game, look at the game Fischer-Larsen, so from their 70 candidates match. One of the most famous Sicilian Dragons, this setup. So here there are two moves. Bishop g5 is the main move. Bishop h6 is the second most common, which Vladimir Kramnik played. The idea behind bishop g5 is that you're trying to occupy the queen side with your pieces before moving your pawns forward. So for example, rook c5 is one of the main moves. You get your king out of the way with king b1. Black starts his attack. Rook c5 was simply to defend the b5 pawn. Now we play g4. And if a5, then you can simply continue gh5. And sometimes taking this knight is going to be useful, but more importantly, after knight h5, because you never really want to, you want to take with the g-pawn, then after knight h5, this pawn is pinned. And very often there are going to be tricks on this diagonal. For example, white should continue with the move knight d5, and this seemingly wins a piece for black, but if black goes wrong with the move a4, then that's a huge blunder. You simply take knight takes e7, of course, that's just, it was just double attacked. And after something like king h7, now you simply win the queen. Knight takes g6, attacking the queen, attacking the rook. I mean, it's just game over. If you move the queen, then I take your rook with check, so you win a ton of material. So that's bishop g5. In the game though, bishop h6 was played, and that's a more human move. I think it's very hard to see this pin and this knight d5 idea, especially with your king on c1. The idea behind bishop h6 is simply to exchange the bishops. And there are two moves here. I think the more principled move for black is knight c4, after bishop c4, rook c4, bishop g7, king g7, g4, the attack starts, and now hg4 and h5 is one of the main ideas, and black is banking on the move rook h8 to try and contest the h file. So takes f4, white advances. All of this has been played plenty of times, so we are still in theory. This is move 19, move 20. But instead of that, Kramnik's opponent after bishop h6 actually exchanges. That is the more commonly played move, and now gives up the exchange with rook takes c3. And that's what I was trying to point out earlier. An exchange sacrifice on c3 is very common, and this is in fact quite good for black. This is one of the better moves, and black is equal, could even be slightly better in this position, depending who plays more precisely. It should be still a balanced position, but it's definitely very sharp. So we're on move 15, and black plays the move queen a5. Okay, queen a5 attacks the c3 pawn, and there are a couple of options here. Well, there are a couple of options, but only one option is good. So most people would be tempted to play knight e2, which Kramnik played, which is a mistake. The idea behind knight e2 is, of course, to defend the c3 pawn. However, the only move ever played is king b1. And Kramnik, 9 years old, messed up on move 16, but he only reversed the move order because king b1, knight e2 is what you usually play, and not knight e2 first. The reason is, after you play king b1, if queen c3 is played, then you can gain a very important tempo with knight e2 and queen c5, which is just the most common move. You could also retreat to a5, and now you play knight f4, and this is a very scary attack. So it's well worth a doubled c-pawn. And after king b1, what's usually played, and that's rook to c8, for example. Now you can continue with g4, simply ignoring the c3 pawn still. So queen takes c3, g takes h5, knight c4 is the main move, and bishop c4, rook c4, and now you continue with rook to d3, and this is one of the sharpest lines. So you basically want your knight on d4 because you want it to be controlling the b3 square. So queen b4 check, knight b3, and now again a balanced position, very sharp. In another variation, if after king b1 black plays the move b5, now that the b5 square is occupied by a pawn and the bishop cannot occupy it, now you can play the move knight e2. So I think Kramnik reversed the move order here. Simply played knight e2 before he played king b1. So after knight e2, he is slightly worse. And as I said, in the Dragon, you make one mistake, you're worse. Now the position has gone from plus 0.3 to like minus 0.5, which is a lot on Grandmaster and World Champion level. Since his opponent was probably an amateur, it didn't matter that much. So one of the best moves here would have been bishop b5, simply using the fact that white had wasted the tempo on moving the knight, and you could play knight d4, which is objectively the best move, or you could play rook h to e1. Another way to punish the move knight e2 was simply queen a3 and trying to advance the pawn. Now, knight e2 definitely an imprecision, but his opponent didn't really punish that. He played rook c8, which is okay. Sorry. So after rook c8, king b1 is played now, and now you can see that the knight isn't really doing much on e2. You don't really care about your c3 pawn, and you basically don't have time to play knight f4 now because rook c8 has already been played and black has a lot of pressure. So after bishop b5, Kramnik actually brings the knight back, which is the best move, so that's okay. And in this position, his opponent loses the game. He played bishop to a4. Now, I'd like you to pause the video and try to win the game for white. Just find the winning idea. Okay, so in this position, Kramnik played the absolutely crushing knight e6. After knight e6, if you don't take the knight, then it's mate. Your king has no escape squares, so you have to take. And after you take, bishop takes, and of course your rook is hanging, so you win a ton of material. That's first of all. Also, the king has no squares, so the only move is retreating the knight back to f7. So by playing the move knight e6, black's position just got completely destroyed. Now, okay, the next moves, every move Kramnik played was either the absolutely best move or one of the best moves, and his conversion here was spot on. So for a 9-year-old boy, just an incredible game. Okay, so queen g6, the obvious first move. King h8, and he takes the rook. Okay, fine. So bishop takes rook. In this position, queen c3 was played, and now you need to play precisely. You could go wrong, but of course, the obvious only move is e5, incredibly strong. So e5 defends the c2 pawn, also opens up some more lines, which could be useful. Okay, and in this position, well, there are a couple of options for black. All of them lose. So let's say you take on e5 with the knight, then queen h6 check, and after knight h7, which is the only move, you simply play bishop to f5, and you can resign. Okay, another option after e5 is d takes e5, of course, but now bishop e6 just wins the game. And after bishop e6, you would have to keep checking, queen b4 check, bishop b3, bishop e8, something like rook h3, and you just get your rook to g3 and eventually mate on g7. And if you play something like bishop b5, which does nothing, then you can either take on f6 or you can take the knight on f7. So black decided to keep checking. He played queen b4 check, which objectively you're lost, so you might as well try to mate him. So king c1, queen a3, a bunch of checks. In this position, of course, if you mess up with something like king e1, then queen e3 is mate, so you could still go wrong. King to g3, queen takes e5 check, king to h3, knight to d5. Okay, there were no more checks. And now, in this position, if you count the material, it's 2 rooks against 2 knights and bishop versus bishop. So Kramnik is actually 2 exchanges up, which is too much. And now the conversion, rook takes d5, simply getting rid of the knight that was defending the position. More importantly, provoking the queen into d5. And after queen takes d5, the final move of the game was bishop e6. And that's it. No checks. You're losing a piece, and that's it. If you play something like queen c6, getting the queen away from the attack, then this is actually a mate in 5. Post video, I actually had a rough time solving this. It took me about half an hour to solve the mate in 5. So pause the video, try to find a mate in 5 for white. Okay, it's queen h5 check, king to g7, queen takes f7 check, king to h6, and now queen f8 check, king to g6, queen f5 check, bishop to f5 check, not queen f5, that was one of my variations, king to h5 and g4 check. Okay, so mate in 5. And I couldn't believe that this was played by a 9-year-old boy. This is, I think, the best game we've seen so far in the series on World Champions. For when it comes to them being very young, Kramnik was definitely the most talented. So we covered Kasparov at 12 or at 10, Capablanca at 10, Fischer was 12 or 13. So everybody was much older. Kramnik was 9. This is insane. This game was just insane. I hope you liked the game. We will continue the series next Friday. And yeah, thank you for watching. Let me know what you think and stay tuned for more chess. Bye bye.